during which she conducted biomedical and thermodynamic fluid research in space on behalf of the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences, where she serves as the Director of Human Spaceflight and a Microgravity Instructor and Test Flight Director. Kellie will lead the IIASO-2 research mission in 2026, and her second spaceflight will advance the scientific knowledge gained from IIASO-1 and introduce novel biomedical research alongside with her international crewmates. Here on Earth, Kellie has tested and matured technologies across more than 150 parabolas in microgravity research, flight campaigns including with MIT, the National Research Council of Canada, and the Canadian Space Agency. Kellie has been profiled in publications ranging from Glamour to Forbes and has appeared on shows including The Jennifer Hudson Show and the CBS Morning Show. Her children's book series, Luna Moona, has been read from both the International Space Station and the White House. Known online for embracing her multitudes and praised for her refreshing transparency, documenting her personal struggles through IVF and pregnancy loss, Kellie paints a powerful portrait of modern motherhood and is the recipient of the 2025 People's Voice Award. Kellie lives in Jupiter, Florida with her husband and her daughter, Delta D. Now we're gonna give her something that she is used to, but that's a countdown. We ready? Not just any countdown, a
Light
Vantage
everybody on their
countdown.
feet for this one too.
We gotta get you on your feet. Give her that countdown. You ready, Light Vantage family?
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
Thank you so much. What a nice welcome. I really appreciate that. That's clever. I like that. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be with all of you here today. And I'm particularly excited about this theme of drive. I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, but I think you'll agree that so many of these principles of determination, of innovation, resilience have been a cornerstone of my personal story too. And I did want to extend a truly grateful thanks to Kristen for such a kind introduction. I have to say, hearing my own biography like that and kind of listening to the whole thing backstage and hearing it out loud is a little bit of an out-of-body experience. To have dreamed of something for your entire life and then to hear it described by someone else and be ready to get on a stage like this and talk about it and reflect on what it was like. It reminds me of that viral before and after photo trend. I don't know if you've seen it. It's how it started versus how it's going. And I think a lot of times when we hear a highlight reel of achievement, it can feel so inevitable and predestined. Whether it's a successful business practice or a personal goal, we don't always hear so much about how someone goes about building the foundation that carries you far. We see a lot of how it started, we see a lot of how it's going, but I think this trend really skips the important part in the middle, the how it happened. And those years are so important, they're everything. So my personal path to space was unconventional, which is to say it did not exist. It hadn't been done before. Of course, NASA existed if you wanted to go the government route, and space tourism was beginning to exist if you were very wealthy, but it did not yet exist as an option for a civilian researcher to be sent to space on a dedicated science mission until my research institute sent me. And thank you. I like the scattered woos. Keep those coming. No, but truly, it was just as monumental of an opportunity as it sounds. And Kristen mentioned this in the introduction, but I did want to just provide a little bit of context to the number of humans who have ever journeyed beyond our planet. When I flew as a payload specialist in 2023, I became the 677th human and the 90th woman to do so. And to think that I was one of the first 100 women in history to travel to space is surreal. But that opportunity was not a complete surprise to me, because even though the path might not have existed yet, I had spent the previous decade plus laying the foundation for it brick by brick, because I had belief and determination. And I just always like to clarify the mindset there, because there was never the ego of course it'll be me, of course I'll get there, I deserve it. None of that. But there was the quiet confidence of, okay, well, if I work hard enough for long enough, why not me? And I think that mindset, that contradiction of humility and confidence, that's really what makes all the difference in the world. Motivation also played a critical role in my journey, because my dream was always so much bigger than just flying to space myself. I wanted to help blow open the door to commercial human spaceflight for the next generation of scientists. That was the intrinsic motivation. That was the North Star of my career. This belief that there's a tidal wave of research waiting to benefit from access to space, and that scientists can use space as a laboratory to benefit humanity. That's the impact that I wanted to have in my career. Like all of you, I wanted to be a part of providing solutions that would help people. And a little bit of background about me briefly. I grew up in Jupiter, Florida, which is very on brand for someone with my personal passions, Jupiter High School. And I like to joke that I had front row seats to the final frontier growing up. My bedroom window in Jupiter faced north, facing that stretch of sky over Cape Canaveral, where I could see human beings leaving our planet to live and work in space. That was part of the backdrop of my adolescence, knowing that people were living and working in space. And so I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to contribute to that. Space, to me, has always represented the best and most exciting potential of humanity. All of those big existential questions. Where did we come from? Are we alone? Why are we here? I can't claim to have any of the answers to any of those questions, but I feel like we're on the right path. So that dream of opening up access to space for the next generation of scientists was my North Star, and I spent my career working on every aspect and angle of that. Space policy, regulatory reform, rocket hardware, and eventually microgravity research with my research institute. It was a winding road. And like any good winding road, there's the potential for motion sickness. So before I flew to space, I had spent a lot of time in microgravity here on Earth. And I'm sorry, the redactions are just until we publish. I hope you understand. But for the last 10 years, my research career has involved flight campaigns with the National Research Council of Canada, seen here, where I've served as an instructor and a flight test director on a number of parabolic flights. And just to explain what that is, the aircraft takes this roller coaster profile and it free falls, and then it pulls up fast over and over and over again. You can probably tell where the nickname the vomit comet comes from. So when the aircraft is in free fall, you experience as a researcher about 12 to 20 seconds of weightlessness, of microgravity, and that's where we conduct all of our research in those brief bursts of free fall before the aircraft pulls up again and you have the higher G-forces. So I've flown more than 150 parabolas in my research career, and it's an incredible platform. It truly is. It's a really revolutionary way to mature and test new technologies. But if you really want to validate something, 12 seconds isn't enough time. You need to actually be in space. And so I want to make something very clear about this decade of research. There was not one single moment during that decade where there was the promise made to me that any of those parabolas were going to lead me on a path to actually flying to space. It was quite the opposite. There was a deafening chorus of people telling me all the reasons it wasn't going to happen. And yet, I truly believed that flying to space for our research institute, for our scientists, was a when and not an if. Not because I was extraordinary or any of my colleagues are extraordinary, but because I believed in the purpose of what we were building and in the momentum of the industry and in my own potential to be worthy of an opportunity to further that research in space if one ever emerged. I think my head was in the game for all the same reasons you've built your careers here, with a mission-driven organization. And because of that, every single what if we fail spiral in the back of my head was rebutted with, okay, but what if we don't? So after many years of incremental progress, a transformational shift finally came, and it felt like a whole lot of things happened at once. The commercial space industry had really matured. That was the first thing. Access was opening up, not only for private tourists, but now for academia as well to use these platforms. And in addition to their tourism business, these spaceflight providers saw the potential of their spacecraft to serve the science community, to transform their spacecraft cabin into a laboratory for researchers. And so in 2023, after years of conducting microgravity research here on Earth, my research institute announced me as their first ever payload specialist, contracted to fly on a dedicated science mission for Virgin Galactic. These are my 2 patches that I got to fly on my spacesuit. Thank you. So my job as a payload specialist was to operate experiments and conduct scientific research in space. And on that first mission, I conducted different fluid and biomedical research on behalf of our space medicine group. And I would just love to very briefly show you a couple of examples of what that can look like in space. So one experiment that you see here was a free-floating fluid cell, and it was designed to help us better predict and control how liquid behaves in a container in microgravity. This is important for a number of different technologies, like life support systems, or even imagine syringe design for administering medication in space. How do you ensure you get only liquid and not air in that syringe? I'm in the middle of an IVF cycle right now, so this is very top of mind and apropos as I mix those every morning. But operationally, this research pushed the envelope too. A little bit of fun backstory on this experiment. A former version of it was actually sent up on a space shuttle mission, but the way that it was bolted to the spacecraft caused G-jitter, which unfortunately ruined the video data and prevented image analysis for the science team. And then a decade after that space shuttle flight, the experiment earned a spot on an early SpaceX Falcon 9 cargo resupply mission to the ISS. Unfortunately, that rocket exploded shortly after liftoff, and the rocket and the spacecraft that was holding all of the payloads was destroyed. And then 10 years after that, I got the chance to bring it to space myself, and I got the data we needed. So the lesson here is if you want something done right, no, I'm just kidding. It is nothing but immense respect for the legacy of all that went into that. But in thermodynamic nerd worlds, this was a big deal, and it was a really cool validation that researchers can now fly with their experiments. Okay, so another study, and I'll go briefly through these, was investigating how space affects the human body, and specifically the female body. Because I was only the 90th woman in history to have flown to space at the time, nearly all of the women who have flown before me were part of a very homogeneous medical profile and background. We want to start building a more diverse data set, and to do that, I wore something called the AstroSkin Biomonitor Wearable Sensor System. It's basically a sophisticated smart shirt that captures a number of different biometric measurements during all phases of flight. This exact same garment is currently worn by astronauts on the International Space Station, but my mission was the first time we were also able to collect data during all phases of flight: launch, re-entry, and landing. And I'll just share one last one here. This is probably my favorite research study that we conducted. It's investigating insulin resistance in space, and there's evidence that suggests that long-duration spaceflight affects insulin resistance, but there's uncertainty as to how long that takes to develop. So as part of this research, I wore a continuous glucose monitor in my arm. It was one of the first times that a CGM has been worn in space. The science story is very interesting, and that was the primary goal, but the human story with the CGM ended up being my favorite part. My mom is insulin dependent with type 1 diabetes, has been for my entire life. So are a lot of children in my community. And some of you might not know this, but when a child is diagnosed with juvenile diabetes, the doctor's script is to reassure them by telling them, hey, don't worry, this is a manageable condition. The only thing you can't do is be an astronaut. As though that is so far-fetched that it's not something that they have to worry about. But to some kids, hearing that is devastating. And for decades, diabetes and insulin dependence has been a disqualifying condition for spaceflight from a risk perspective for a space agency. Even with a well-managed condition, These devices also haven't been tested over commercial cruising altitudes because why would they be, right? So being able to demonstrate the efficacy in the unique environment of space, both to the manufacturer and to a spaceflight provider, and to show a little bit of visible representation to all of these kids who need to know that, the sky is not the limit on their dreams, was pretty cool. The minute I heard the can't be done part of that doctor's script, I was like, okay, we've got a new mission now, and we're gonna make sure every kid knows that that's out of date for the next generation. Thank you. And this is my favorite part to talk about. You would think by now I would have the words to do it justice. And every time I prepare myself to speak about this and try to do it justice, I struggle to articulate exactly how profound it was. But what I'll tell you is that I felt so incredibly well-trained from the science perspective. I thought that I knew exactly what to expect during my spaceflight. In hindsight, I realized that nothing could have prepared me from the emotional aspect of seeing planet Earth with my own eyes. Once I got the data that I needed from my experiments and I resecured them, I was actually able to finally look out the window and really look at our home planet. And I'm just going to show you a photo of that moment that was captured of me, because you'll see it's just awe. It's kind of funny to look at, but that was the honest reaction. And we've all seen pictures of the Earth from space, right? And from much further away. But the difference for me was experiencing Earth as a planet. This phenomenon of seeing your home planet with your own eyes, that cognitive shift in perspective, that's been coined as the overview effect. And for me, the way I experienced that was just this realization washing over me that I was looking at our entire world, every human who has ever lived, past and present, and experiencing this intense cognitive dissonance of feeling both a part of it and being slightly outside of it. And then as a mother, and this is the part I always choke up about, as a mom, realizing in that moment, the emotional realization that I was not on the same planet as my baby. It's mind-bending, it's beautiful, it's profound. I don't have the words to do it justice, and I'm still processing it years later, and I think I always will be. This will be my mental screensaver until the day that I die, every time I close my eyes. The only part that I don't remember about my spaceflight was re-entering Earth's atmosphere. It's a little bit of a black hole in my memory. After flying Mach 3 and just coming down from this adrenaline surge and fall like no other, I had so many competing emotions in my head. I had euphoria from the view of Earth. I had relief that I got the data and that I did the job that I was sent to do. This was one of those you have one job situations, and I was like, all right, we nailed it. And then I also had an overwhelming sense of gratitude that I had kept my one promise to my family and didn't die. And, it's a funny thing to think about, because I was well trained for emergency procedures, but no one really talks to you about how to navigate that topic of risk with your family when you're flying, especially when you're flying on a science mission. It's really focused on the science and the research. But I flew only on the 5th ever commercial human flight of that spacecraft, and test pilot life had been tragically lost in test flights of its predecessor. I had full confidence in the team and the spacecraft. I want to make that very clear. I got 7 hours of sleep the night before my spaceflight. But that's not an easy thing to be able to translate to your loved ones who are perhaps not in this field or this industry. And it wasn't until I came across, accidentally, a good day, bad day press release draft in my team's Google folder that it really hit home. As you might know, anytime there's a major event, there are 2 versions of press releases that are drafted. You always hope to issue the one where things went well, but you have one ready to go in the moment of emergency in case they don't. And that draft was never meant for my eyes, but as soon as I saw the title, I opened it and read it anyway. And it wasn't until I got to the line, "She is survived by," and I saw my daughter's name and I saw my husband's name in black and white, that I finally understood the journey from their perspective. And I went a little bit manic that weekend. I wrote nearly 100 letters to my daughter, one for every single birthday of what I hoped would be an incredibly long and fulfilling life, just in case. And the big joke in my family is that I only wrote 4 for my husband. And I told him it was like I ran out of time and my hand was cramping, and then I was like, and also you need someone in life, let's be honest. But I did survive, and I began to see the impact. Thank you. It's such an interesting, new, novel thing to go through with your family, the human side of human spaceflight. But I really began to see the impact of my flight the moment that I returned to Earth. And the most rewarding aspect was seeing it through the eyes of my 7-year-old daughter, Delta. When I flew, we had fewer than 100 female astronauts. But in my daughter's mind, flying to space is just another thing girls do. And that, I have a tough time explaining how profound that is. Because if you tell me right now, close my eyes and picture someone doing science in space, I am not picturing someone who looks like me. I'm just not. And I've done the work, I went there, did it myself. I am still not picturing that. But if you ask my daughter to draw a picture of an astronaut, she's drawing a girl. She's drawing herself. And it's so special to see the needle move in my own house. And I can't get, this is basically like my family photo album you're all subjected to now, but my mom was also at my flight, and that's her there. She's, just my biggest cheerleader in life. But her presence was also such a powerful reminder of how much can change in a single generation. When my mom was born, human beings had not yet been to space, and when she was growing up, women in the United States were not eligible to fly to space. But one single generation later, she watched her daughter reach the stars, and she watched her granddaughter take it for granted. And that kind of paradigm shift is what gives me the optimism and the hope for the future that our children will inherit. And now, in the present, I get to be here on the other side of my big dream in life. And now I find myself reaching for even higher stars. About 6 months after my first mission, my research institute announced another flight assignment for me. In 2026, I'll be leading an all-female science team on a follow-up mission on a brand new class of spacecraft. Because what do you do when someone doubts that you can do something? You do it twice and you take photos. But the next mission is going to be even more exciting for me than the first. I'm going to be flying first with my colleague, Dr. Shauna Pandya. She's a physician and a medical doctor from Canada who becomes Canada's 4th ever female astronaut. And our other colleague, Dr. Nora Patton. She's an aeronautical engineer from Ireland who becomes her country's 1st ever astronaut, which is pretty remarkable. And I agree. It's incredible. It's an incredible time to be in this industry. And the thing I love most about this all-female science team is that it wasn't designed that way. It just worked out that way based on the science priorities and the expertise required. And that's a pretty special thing too. So we recently just finished our payload solicitation and our open call for science for that mission. And we're in the middle of reviewing payload proposals from scientists and space agencies around the world. It was the first ever human-tended science solicitation for a suborbital spaceflight. And what I've realized is that once one first happens, an avalanche more tends to follow. And I would be remiss not to mention that I hope to have 100 more letters to write in the future, because after 7 years of secondary infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss following the birth of my daughter, I've been on a very difficult IVF journey, which I've shared very transparently with the world in real time, just with the hope of helping shine a little bit more of a light on something that's so often navigated in silence. And I had a miscarriage most recently back in February, and even though that was one of the most difficult chapters of my life, I had to learn to rely on that same foundation and mindset that led me to space in the first place. And it really does relate to me, to this drive theme, those same principles of determination, of resilience. My last round of IVF was a shattering failure, but I am not changing my goal, I'm changing my protocol. And that's the mindset that I keep bringing to everything that I do in life, personally and professionally. I just refuse to believe that any of the dreams that are in my heart are not meant for me. I think we can change our approach without changing our goals. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm up here, I'm like, you will not cry today. I'm in the middle of this IVF round, so my hormones are not in my control right now, but we're good so far. But it brings me back to this highlight reel, because a couple of years from now, that bio that you heard, that introduction of me, I have a feeling that it's gonna gloss over 2 space flights and 2 children. And it might sound like it was inevitable or that it was predestined, because I think it's so easy to believe that success just falls on extraordinary people. That's not true. The reality is that ordinary people make themselves capable of extraordinary things. And mindset, I'm so glad that resonates, because I truly find it to be such an important thing to remember when you have big dreams. That mindset, belief sustained over time, is the core of that. It's that contradiction of humility and confidence that can translate, it can't be done this way, into, it hasn't been done this way yet. It's the difference of seeing opportunities versus seeing dead ends. It's the resilience of powering through decades where it feels like nothing is happening, and earning those moments where it feels like decades happen. And I have to be honest, a lot of people will never get there. They'll never get through that, because they will either let their ego get in the way and they won't be able to mentally recover the first time or the second time that they fail, or worse, they will write off their dream as unrealistic or fear failing so much that they don't even try in the first place. But if you can get that balance of humility and confidence right, and maintain it through the ups, the downs, the plateaus, you will eventually reach the other side of your goals. And then when someone tells you that you just got lucky, you can tell them, I didn't get lucky, I just failed more times than you tried. I know, I get a little fired up with that one. But there truly are so many parallels between the theme for this week and between my journey. It took everything in me not to fill the entire presentation with rocket puns and jokes about fuel and motors. But there's something really important here. And it's worth the time after you go home from this event to reflect on what those themes mean for you, personally and professionally. Because when I think of vehicles, I think of building a career that's designed to win, designed to take me far. I think of that foundation that has to be built, what it means to have all cylinders firing. When I think of fuel, I think about what drives me forward. That perfect fuel blend of motivation, belief, resilience, timing, support, community, and passion can be fuel too. I didn't start out with any of the answers in my career. I started with a lot of questions and a lot of passion. That's what fueled my journey. And then I think it's so important to eliminate anything that's causing drag and slowing you down, whether it's negative self-talk, whether it's limiting beliefs or perspectives, whether it's unsupportive structures or environments, and sometimes people. And when I think of engine, I think about the mechanics of a high-performance mission, and I think about how the right systems and the right mechanics are essential to long-term success. So you have to figure out what's the right and sustainable structure for your life personally and professionally to keep you going for the long haul, because you're not building for just one moment or one win, or in my case, one mission. You're building for a long and successful and impactful career. And that's what I think of when I think of the big race. I think of consistently competing at the highest level. Not just about getting the opportunity in the first place, but about executing and knocking it out of the park when it counts. And I've spent enough time with the LifeVantage team to know that all of us are in this room with high ambition and here for the benefit of increased quality of life on Earth. And we are believers that individuals can help pioneer life-changing solutions for humanity. So what everyone in this room does every day, every year, has the potential to change the quality of life for people. It can raise the bar. It can set standards for an entire industry. And you already know that success is not something that's achieved by accident. It's designed, it's fueled, it's launched with precision. So knowing what you've already accomplished and what you're capable of, I think you all owe it to yourselves to leave here today in why not me mode, ready to double down on the bet on yourself, pave new paths from brick walls, and reach for even higher stars. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
It's your sky full of stars. I'm gonna give